Come, let us gather beyond what we already know into our unfolding stories. Come, as works in progress, as living poems, half-written, half-dreamed, wholly worthy. Come, daring souls, as seekers discovering our faces, open to some small personal revelation, and maybe even a little enlightenment. Let us worship in the temple of the imagination, where art is sacrament, difference is blessing, and beauty is a form of courage. Let us please be in the spirit of meditation. Rest your eyes, let them close or go to soft focus. Imagine, if you will, a version of yourself you have not entirely dared to become. Imagine a vision of you have not yet spoken. Imagine a life shaped like a work of art. Let the familiar self soften a bit. Let subtle textures emerge. Let yourself sense the stirrings of the soul. Oscar Wilde described the love that dare not speak its name as beautiful, fine, deep, pure, spiritual, perfect. That was a while back. Now we can talk about same-sex love, being transgender, bisexual, many other ways of being true to oneself. Not that the cruelty has ended. This morning, we stand by all those who are oppressed or criticized because of who they love. Oh, by the way, Live Oak's status as a UU welcoming congregation involves frequent programs honoring the LGBTQ community. We have a table at the Pride Fair. We were the first home for the gay pride prom here for a number of years until they essentially outgrew the place and had to find larger quarters. So this, we had the first legal same-sex wedding between clergy here, the Reverend Tom and Bob, yeah. It was a beautiful occasion. It was right in this room. So we go back. As for my own contribution recently, a total of 6 of my sermons in this congregational year relate to gay themes. So today's topic is specifically to celebrate June as Pride Month. Our subject is the most iconic gay public figure of all time, writer and wit, Oscar Wilde. Had fun picking out the pictures. Quite a flashy dresser. The future bon vivant was born into story in 1854 to a fashionable Dublin family. We've been there, there's a plaque, you take a snapshot, there's a statue of him across the street, sort of lounging, reading a book, very Oscar Wilde. He grew up reading books, immersed in conversation and savoring the mythic imagination. Studied at Trinity College Dublin, then Oxford, where he absorbed the idea that life itself could be shaped like a work of art. If you visit Oxford, Magdalen College will show you his rooms, including his rather lavish decorations, which prompted him at one point to say, "I find it harder and harder every day to live up to my blue china." His epigrams are legendary. Some early examples include, "I have the simplest tastes. I am always satisfied with the best." And "Be yourself. Everyone else is already taken. And the only thing to do with good advice is pass it on. It is never of any use to oneself." These are quips. They're also spiritual provocations. Oscar Wilde understood something quite profound. Part of how we discover ourselves is through creating a sense of personal style. You may think, well, that's just the sweater I like. Yeah, but it's the sweater you like, and it's the one you wear, and this is me, and some of you look around, people have other statements they are making. Unitarians do a pretty casual thing, but casual dressing isn't any easier than formal dressing. You're going through your things. Let's see, today, what's the mood? Yeah, maybe that one. Well, he was already sensing the tension between the mask we put on when we're around others and the soul, the invisible part of ourself that longs to emerge. He stood in that fertile in-between space, the borderland between who we are expected to be and who we feel called to become. And he chose the dangerous path, self-expression, life as artistic statement. He succeeds first as a poet, publishing a major collection in 1881. More significantly, he becomes a dashing man about town, seen at important parties, opening nights at the theater. Like today's stars of reality TV, he became famous mainly for being famous. The producers of a light musical, a Gilbert and Sullivan piece called Patience, were about to launch their Broadway staging. Now, Patience was a send-up of the aesthetes, this crowd that Oscar Wilde was part of, that said that beauty is everything, and art is how we create ourselves. It's our spiritual journey. And they were very popular in London and completely unknown in the colonies. New York had no idea, and the play was based on sort of satiring. So the producers had a brilliant idea. They would hire the leading of this aesthetic movement, send him to New York, have him give some lectures, kind of explain what this thing was while the show opened. And it worked. He took the job, he needed the money. He also saw that there was going to be some attention involved. He went, and there were several lectures he was supposed to go. They were a big hit. He actually adapted himself. He wasn't a trained lecturer, and he took some classes. He really wanted this thing to work. And the first few didn't go that well, so he changed it very quickly. And then they were big hits. And then more dates were added, and more dates were added. And this stunt worked. He ended up giving 140 lectures all across the country. In California, he gave 5 lectures all in the sort of Bay Area. Stockton, which was one of the biggest cities in California at the time, is one of the places that he lectured. He said, in America, one place is unusually beautiful, Domenico's restaurant in New York, absolutely exquisite. Oh, there's one other that might compete, Yosemite Valley. So he met people, Walt Whitman, Henry James, Unitarians, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, and Louisa May Alcott. And he became an effective spokesman for beauty, nature, and the contribution of artists. The American Lecture Tour was a key moment in Wilde's development. He became skillful in articulating his personal beliefs of individualism and the redemptive powers of creativity. This lecture tour was the workshop in which he polished his charismatic persona, his act. His humor was often at the expense of his hosts, here and everywhere. He said, "America is the only country that went from barbarism to decadence without civilization in between." Audiences ate it up. The Oscar Wilde who became famous was created largely in America during that year. And he rose to acclaim. He went back to London, the public figure of lasting importance. And his acclaim extends to marriage. He marries a prominent socialite, has 2 sons, moves in cultured circles, lives in a home filled with beauty, conversation, and calculated flamboyance. He becomes a celebrity of wit and style, and the aphorisms just keep rolling out. I can resist everything except temptation. Work. Work is the curse of the drinking class. I am never so clever that sometimes I don't understand. Oh, excuse me, I misread. Got to get these right. I am so clever that sometimes I don't understand a single word of what I am saying. The public have an insatiable curiosity to know everything, except what is worth knowing. So his public identity becomes a performance, a dazzling persona that captures Victorian society. But we can read between the lines. Beneath the performance, deeper currents stir. A shadow gathers. A tension between social identity and inner truth intensifies. And that is revealed, or at least between the lines, in his first big literary success, The Picture of Dorian Gray, one of the stories that I'm sure you're familiar with. This is his only novel. It's a psychological parable, an ethical warning, and a poetic mirror. In hindsight, it clearly reveals some of Wilde's inner struggles. The story is simple and devastating. A strikingly handsome young man, Dorian Gray, has his portrait painted. He makes a desperate wish that the painting would age instead of him. Looking at the beautiful painting, he thinks, that will stay perfect and I will decline. Could it only be the other way around? Sadly, his wish was granted. He remains outwardly youthful and strikingly handsome, while the portrait reflects the corruption of his soul. We should be careful what we wish for. Wilde writes, experience is simply the name we give our mistakes. But he's also a humorist, and there are very witty lines in the novel. There's only one thing in the world worse than being talked about, and that is not being talked about. Behind every exquisite thing that existed, there was something tragic. Nowadays, people know the price of everything and the value of nothing. In Dorian Gray, Wilde notes that when they die, good Americans go to Paris. Somebody said, well, what about the bad Americans? Oh yeah, they stay in America. I love today's topic. I get to step up to the pulpit and be wicked. Back to the story. Dorian splits himself. The outer self becomes a perfect persona. The inner self becomes the disowned, the shadow. Carl Jung would say, what is not integrated can become monstrous. The portrait is the shadow. It absorbs the denied truth of Dorian Gray's life. Dorian becomes a cautionary figure about the danger of living only for appearances, something that Oscar Wilde knew a thing or two about. We must not live for consensus reality, for the aesthetic surface. We need to live for the moral integration of the seen and the unseen. The UU invitation, coming back to our values, is to refuse or avoid binaries, easy black and white thinking, because it is distorted. It is missing more than it says. We are not so much pure versus impure, saint versus sinner, righteous versus damned, winner or loser, but integrated or divided. If we imagine that life is so tidy, we miss the entire beautiful spectrum of the center, sometimes called those shades of gray in between, although I have a therapist friend who prefers to say, in between, all the colors of the rainbow. The painting of Dorian Gray reminds us to be wary of split perceptions. We are all the characters in a novel, all the parts of our dreams. Claiming the rejected elements is worth the trouble. And by the way, if we don't claim them, they often get projected. That is, somebody will annoy us. And if we study that carefully, the thing they do is something we do, but haven't really accepted in ourselves, and so it really bugs us when somebody else does it. Wilde believed that art is revelation. He wrote, life imitates art far more than art imitates life. Art, he thought, goes beyond instruction. It awakens. Stories and poems create symbolic language to glimpse the complications of the inner life. They allow us to hold contradiction without collapse. They allow paradox to become a spiritual practice. In psychological terms, art is a bridge to the unknown world within, the invisible world of mystery. Art liberates us from tidy this or that thinking. It opens a third space, the symbolic realm, where meaning can deepen. The picture of Dorian Gray is followed in his career by a series of dazzling plays that seem light-hearted on the surface, but deliver searing social commentary. Lady Windermere's Fan, in which a suspicious husband and a scheming, scandalous woman threaten a loyal wife's marriage. But a surprising reveal saves the day. Yes, there is a happy ending, but a lot of heavy lifting happens in between. The themes of secrets and distrust hint at the tension between Wilde's persona and his secret life. The play is a huge success, followed by A Woman of No Importance, in which a cynical aristocrat and a puritanical woman clash over society's standards regarding a wealthy bachelor's scandalous past. Wilde skewers the hypocrisy of how social conventions hide secret lives. You can see a thread here. His next hit is An Ideal Husband, where an ambitious politician is idealized by his wife until a past secret comes out. Love involves accepting someone, faults and all. Wilde suggests morality is simply the attitude we adopt toward people we personally dislike. Then Wilde's crowning jewel, it comes in 1895, The Importance of Being Earnest. The Importance of Being Earnest is a comedy hiding philosophy. It is a play of paradox. Two men invent alter egos, both named Ernest as it happens, to escape social obligations and pursue romance. Of course, it all becomes outrageously tangled. Mistaken identities multiply until truth collapses into absurdity. The surface is all comedy. The structure is social critique. His lines sparkle. The truth is rarely pure and never simple. I never travel without my diary. One should always have something sensational to read. To lose one parent may be regarded as a misfortune. To lose both looks like carelessness. Lady Bracknell is Wilde's inner critic made theatrical. She represents society's rigid rules, moral judgment, and obsession with status. She is his awareness of social absurdity, his iconic distance from Victorian pretend morality. She represents the superego, the cultural voice. He exposes it by exaggerating it. She says, no woman should be ever quite accurate about her age. It looks so calculating. Never speak disrespectful of society. Only people who can't get into it do that. But then there's his boyfriend, Bosie. He has different romantic encounters over the time, and most prominent homosexuals were married in those days. It was a thing. He was, of course, living in a time when homosexuality was criminalized. At the very peak of his success, the same year The Importance of Being Earnest comes out, he falls for a moody young man, Bosie. His name was Lord Alfred Douglas, but everyone called him Bosie. This romantic obsession leads to a catastrophic series of lawsuits and trials. Bosie's father, as it happens, is a very angry man who blames Oscar Wilde for his son's sexual proclivities. It isn't like a vampire bite. It's not like he was, talked into it by the older lover. But there's a great tension and anger, rage really, between father and son, and Bosie encourages Wilde to sue his father, Bosie's father, for these insults. The only trouble was the insults were based on truth. So, of course, the lawsuit fell apart, and then the Marquis of Queensberry, as his father's title, sues Wilde back, and all his private life goes into court, and he is found guilty of gross indecency and subject to 2 years at hard labor. This broke Oscar Wilde. It came the same year as his triumph. He is sent off to prison. His society turned against him. His finances collapsed. His reputation destroyed. Of course, he retains his wit. When the gods wish to punish us, he said, they answer our prayers. That one's heavy. Another, one should always be a little improbable. So now he's living in between disgrace and his former dignity, exile and his former prominence, collapse and insight. He is a descent into the underworld personified. In prison, he writes an epic poem, The Ballad of Reading Gaol, a lament, a moral reckoning, a psychological revelation born from direct encounter with suffering, something he hadn't known before. Also injustice and human frailty. It represents Wilde's profound confrontation with the shadow, not only his own, but the shared darkness of humanity. He notes how the criminal is a scapegoat, the externalized shadow of the collective. The poem dissolves binary thinking. It's not about innocence versus guilty or moral versus immoral, but conscious versus unconscious. The deeper sin is not wrongdoing, it is lack of awareness. In prison, Wilde undergoes a psychic descent. His health is destroyed. His previous wit, which usually danced above suffering, now grounds itself within it. He discovers some things. Suffering creates depth. Shared suffering creates compassion. Witnessing suffering creates responsibility. In the symbolism of the poem, the prison becomes the archetypal underworld. The walls represent psychic containment. The routine represents dehumanization. Society tends to conceal what it cannot integrate, hides people away. Wilde reverses this process. Through his writing, he brings the hidden into language. He transforms concealment into revelation. He describes how punishment creates a spiritual geography of isolation, yet within that isolation, Wilde discovers compassion and depth. Wilde moves from his youthful self-importance to an emergent self-awareness. In Unitarian Universalist terms, he arrives at realizing the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Wilde teaches through this poem that the line between criminal and citizen is thin, fragile, illusory. He invites us not to stand beside one another, to understand and to integrate. Not be so far from each other. And perhaps radically, most radically, to recognize that the work of justice is a courageous act of seeing the full humanity even in those we fear, reject, or condemn. His other late writing is De Profundis, written in prison again. This is Wilde's great spiritual confession. It is not witty in the way his earlier writing was. It is deeper, slower, more painful. He writes, "Where there is sorrow, there is holy ground." He writes, "Suffering is one very long moment." And he comes to the conclusion that the supreme vice is shallowness, quite a critique on his earlier life. Here, Wilde recognizes the necessity of suffering for transformation. He comes to see that his previous life lacked depth, and that suffering, though terrible, opened a spiritual awareness in himself. The soul grows through encounter with the shadow, not avoidance of it. Oscar Wilde spends his final days in poverty. The legal proceedings took all his money. He's in a fourth-rate hotel in Paris. By the way, the hotel is still there. It's not far from the Louvre, directly south. There's a little bridge over the Seine, right over there. He did not like the decor in this modest lodging. His famous last words were, "Either that wallpaper goes or I do." Oscar Wilde dies on November 30th, 1900, buried in Père Lachaise Cemetery along with some famous people like Molière and Proust, Chopin, Edith Piaf. Somebody you've heard of, Jim Morrison of the rock group The Doors, the most visited grave in all of France. Oh, and Balzac. Oscar Wilde's grave is a pilgrimage site itself, sought out by generations who found in him courage, beauty, and resistance. The site has become something of a gay mecca. So what is his legacy? Over time, Wilde has been rediscovered, reclaimed, resurrected. He has become a literary giant, a queer icon, a symbol of artistic freedom. Writers and thinking praise him for his courage, his brilliance, his defiance. The LGBTQ+ community celebrates Wilde as an early martyr of authenticity. His life has become testimony. Testimony that living truthfully in an unaccepting world is both dangerous and sacred. I have some action steps for you. 1, practice radical self-acceptance. Be yourself. Everyone else is already taken. Reflect daily. What part of myself am I hiding? Welcome it. 2, integrate the shadow. Like Dorian Gray, we carry hidden truths. Bring them into compassionate awareness. You don't have to tell everybody, but tell yourself. Know yourself. 3, use art as spiritual practice. Write, tell stories, engage beauty, let imagination reveal your deeper identity. 4, celebrate difference in ourselves and others. See uniqueness as a grand mystery. Honor diversity as celestial expression. Stand with the marginalized. 5, and last, reject binary thinking. Replace right, wrong with deeper inquiry. Embrace paradox as wisdom. Ponder Wilde's grand summary statement. We are all in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars.